Okay, so I'm going to go through the basic operations of how I've laid out the touch panels that'll be set up for the broadcast area, which will be the touch screen that's upstairs in the booth, as well as if you're using an iPad and log in to the um, screen that's called camera. So camera is the name of the screen, or UCI in this case is what QSIS calls their touch screen panels. And camera is the one you're going to want to load, and this is the screen that it starts with. So this is the Mix 1 page, and on this page you'll have navigation buttons to the broadcast. That's these three buttons on the top here. When you select any of the buttons, it takes you to what's available for that page. So in this case, on Mix 1, you've got the lectern, pulpit, the lavalier mics, and switching handheld or lavalier mic, and then the chancel 1 through 6 inputs. Some of these names might change. It just depends on what we want to call them. It does take a little time to change them because I have to do them button by button, and by the time you see how many buttons that is, it's not an easy task. So we'll want to make sure once we've made that change, we've really defined what we want to call these. So I've clicked Mix 2. This shows music 1 through 4 and 5 through 8. The music inputs are going to be, it may only be 6, it may only be 4, I don't know. We want to see what we have as far as availabilities of channels that are going to be in the transept balconies. So in the balconies, and maybe some inputs further on the chancel, but I wanted to give us enough real estate for this many channels available. I believe we're going to have 2 in each balcony, so it's going to be 1, 2, maybe 3, 4, and then maybe some other on the chancel. But between the 6 on the chancel that I've already designated and the music, I don't know if we're going to need this many other inputs in the chancel area. I mean, it's not that much real estate, and I don't know how many inputs we would actually have available to us. So this is what I've got so far in the initial layout. To the right of that, we've got 2 additional inputs, which are the ambient mics that are already there. You'll notice that I have these in a green format with a different nomenclature on the buttons. These behave slightly differently. So on the mix buttons, if you touch and tap, you'll see that as I tap the mouse right now, I'm not on a touch screen, it moves the meter, the bar in the middle, up 1 dB at a time. But if I push and hold it, it'll ramp up or down. And all the blue buttons that have the up down arrows like this are like that, where you can tap or you can push and hold and it'll ramp up and down. And then there's a channel on and off or mute, whichever way you want to look at it. On Mix 2, when we go to the ambient, this just does tap up and down. So you can only tap it 1 dB at a time. It does not have a ramp and hold. This is your Dante in. So for the times when you're going to try to get a mix from an additional mixer that is connected via Dante into the broadcast feed, this would be the channel inputs. And again, it's the touch up and down, but not a ramp. So you have to tap it every time you want it to go up or down 1 dB at a time. This just keeps it from getting crazy by pushing and holding and not realizing how fast it ramped up. And that's why these 3 are like that. In addition to the mixes that are coming in, because some of the jacks on the music side will need some level controls and settings that'll be more of a preamplifier, there's an additional button here that takes us to a page that allows us to adjust things like phantom power or level controls. Again, this is just tap 1 up and down, but this is actually the preamp side, so you don't want to play with these too crazy. And the numbers and settings that you should be using for these, they're shown here on each channel, and then I have given you some guidelines over on the left top areas to show you, like if it's a condenser microphone, it should probably be within the range of 24 to 40 dB, etc. I've got dynamic and some other choices. So just to kind of keep an idea of when you're adjusting this, what those numbers stand for, that's an actual preamp level. You'll also see that they're not only labeled, but there's a little meter that shows here. So there's a bar, that shows you where the settings are, and it's just relative to this here. So as I move this up and down, the pink moves up and down. But if signal were coming in on that channel, there is a preamp level meter that's showing here, and this meter just shows you that there's activity on that channel. Let's say you have somebody on the chancel and you want to have them check a microphone and they were tapping it. You could see which one they were tapping by looking at the meters here, and then you can adjust the levels for that. And down at the bottom of the preamps, there is what's called a high pass filter. It's the way it's worded, so I'm just putting it correctly as is. What seems a little anti-intuitive until you visualize what it says. It says high pass filter. So when it's purple, it means it's removing low frequencies, or it's only passing the high frequencies. This is so that if you're using a vocalist or something like that on that microphone and you don't want to pick up the low end rumble or the organ or some other low end frequencies that don't matter for this particular source of input, you'll want to leave these on the purple state instead of the off state, which is dark gray. And lastly, there is a master button on the top left navigations, and this is the mix master. So this is the outputs of all these mixes as the master to your streaming broadcast. I've done two things here. One is there is a push up and down level control for your master controls and some metering here, but this is a what they call a loudness or LKFS standard meter. This is what YouTube and other broadcast mediums use for metering. So it is an actual loudness metering structure. It's a little different than your typical dB, VU meters, etc. I left this on here. We can talk about whether or not that makes better sense to you, but I think we have an RMS here just to kind of show you a normal standard metering, but bottom line is this is a loudness meter, which is what you're going to want to use for broadcast standards. And then it was asked to have an input in the booth to push to talk. So there's a button here. When you push and hold it, you can talk into a microphone that's going to be set up in the booth. We'll have to navigate how we're going to set that up for you, but I gave you an ability on this master page to have a push to talk and a level control for this push to talk, and this is going to feed into the chancel monitors. Possibly the house sound system will decide where we want the speakers to be connected to this push to talk function, but it just allows you to have some way to talk from the booth down to the church. On the lower left, you'll see two buttons, and these are really going to be used only in the times when there's somebody coming in and they want to use the Dante inputs and outputs for recording and external inputs from a recorded mix. So down here, we have the same inputs and outputs, but these are for Dante's mix only, and I added one other function to them. So there's not only the same channel configuration of these with the Dante, but we also added a panning function because I believe the person who's doing the recording would like to be able to record and maybe pan left and right these channels. This will probably work best from an iPad controlling this screen. In my experience, this type of control where you drag your finger up and down works best either with a mouse or on the iPad screens themselves. On the hardwired touchscreen that's going to be in the booth, it's not as useful. You can do it, it's not as tactily functional. So I would say this is really just better set up for the mix functions of the person using an iPad to mix that, which makes sense because this would be the person who is down in the chancel area where they're going to plug into the jack on the wall for Dante connection to their sound device, recorder, etc., computer. And again, these mixes here are independent of the broadcast feed. So this is a mix that's to and from the Dante inputs and outputs from that external source. So mix one is the mix of these inputs to a separate mixer, and then again the music inputs to a separate mixer that just mixes to the Dante channels. It is independent of the broadcast feed, and you can see over here I've identified each page of the top right here just to kind of give you a lay of where your buttons are pushed, and then you can see where they're navigated on their buttons themselves. There is a Dante master on this particular mix 2 page. This is the output of the mixer from the Dante mix that feeds into the broadcast feed. So if I go back to the Mix 2 page here, that's the same function you see here, which I labeled Dante in. So I labeled it slightly different because it's from a different mix perspective. This is a feed from the Dante feed that is external. Somebody has mixed and sent into the Dante ports, and those Dante ports are now feeding as an input to the broadcast stream. So this would be where you would adjust whether you want to have that in your mix and then what the level would be. And again, these are the tap type that are up and down by 1 dB at a time. And again, on the Mix 2 page here, this Dante master it's the master of all these inputs, and this is the output. It's the same, this fader here is the same as this fader here, but I want to just point out that it says Dante in because this is a feed from an external mixer via Dante Network. And down here, this is the output of that mixer. So this says Dante Master, but they are indeed adjusting the same function, but I just want to point that out, that it's you got a picture in your mind that your external mixer is a Dante source, and that source is an input to this mixer for the broadcast stream. Hopefully that makes sense. I will show you this, but this is what under the hood that looks like. So we've got multiple inputs coming in from different sources, and then there are different mixers that I have those sources routed to. So this is the broadcast mixer, and this is the mixer that you're mixing that's going to the broadcast feed, and this is the mixer that's going to the Dante. Again, this would be too confusing for people to see, so this is the graphic version of that story. So this is just an overview of how the mix to broadcast or mix to stream is set up on the new system. Top left is your navigation for everything that you're going to need for streaming and broadcast, and 99% of the time that's the way you'll use it. But for those times where somebody wants to connect something via Dante port downstairs on the chancel, there are two buttons down here with this Audinate logo on them, and that is what tells you it's Dante. And then when you click one of these, not only do they not go white, but they go yellow, and you'll see up here that it says you are looking at the mix to Dante. I wanted to make it very obvious that you are not doing anything that has to do with the broadcast system or with the house PA system. You are literally just dealing with the Dante mix, and that would only work if somebody's connected via Dante to the network downstairs. Hopefully that helps. Thanks.